Well, despite a contracting GDP in the United Kingdom, advertisers are boosting online advertising, hitting a record high of £4 billion last year. Research by the Internet Advertising Bureau shows that digital media grew by almost 13% in 2010, with some analysts saying this is just the tip of the iceberg. Well, overall digital spending makes up 25% of the UK's annual £16.6 billion spend, compared to mainland Europe and the US, where spending is nearly 15%. Well, to talk to us a little bit more about which direction the advertising industry is heading in, I'm joined now by Robert Senior, the CEO of Saatchi Saatchi Fallon in Europe, the Middle East and Asia. Hello, welcome.
Hello there.
It's an interesting time for all companies at the moment, with all these austerity measures coming in. When companies come to you and they're looking for an advertiser in these times, what is it they want you to do with their brand?
No, that's a very good question, and in fact I would argue that many aren't sure themselves, but I think there's an absolute...
So what do you tell them?
Well,
what do you tell them would be a good idea to do with their brand then?
Change. I think most companies are on a change agenda through necessity or otherwise, and creativity is a fabulous means of signalling change and hopefully signalling some optimism.
So your job then is to come up with that creativity and persuade people, I suppose, that even if their budget is more limited than it was before, you know, this is still the product to buy.
I guess in a way our job is to, I suppose the meta text would be that life does carry on, and we still buy stuff, we still do our daily chores, and we try and keep it optimistic and realistic.
And how much has the whole online thing changed the way you think about advertising?
The online thing's changed everything and nothing. You still need a basic proposition. You need to, what's in it for me, for a consumer? But the online platforms, they allow consumers to choose the degree to which they participate. And if they participate, the dividend, if you like, the creative dividend is enormous. And if they don't, the rejection is instant.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, when you look then across, just taking the UK as an example at the moment, how much can we see whether or not that double-dip recession that we were talking about earlier is likely to happen from the kind of spend that you're getting from clients in the UK? I mean, is there a correlation between spend and where we are in an economic cycle? History
would suggest there is. I would argue that whilst there's a modest increase in the amount being spent, if I can put it this way, the confidence levels are not keeping pace with the spends. So I'm very cautious. So you feel that although people are spending a little bit more, they don't have that confidence? I don't think there's confidence in the mid to long term. And is that come because of the austerity cuts? We know that there's more pain to come. I think it's a hangover from the October 2009 crisis, when everything we knew, it turned out we didn't know. Is there a problem then with high-end brands, this idea that we don't want to be flouting our luxury? Those who still have the money to spend, we heard about shops selling things in brown paper bags and a bit of kind of hush over luxury goods. Do you think that at the top end people don't want to be quite as flash as they were? I think a bit of modesty is the new flash. I think people always want to be flash, it just manifests itself in different ways. So how do you go about creating that kind of advertising campaign for a brand? That's a very good question. I think actually honesty, believe it or not, just sheer outright honesty. Now, you're in charge not only of the UK, but Europe, the Middle East and Asia. There must be huge differences, or maybe you'll tell me there aren't, in the way that you go about creating campaigns for different markets, particularly emerging markets who haven't had all this pain and austerity that we have in the West. I think there are enormous differences, and it is to do with the life cycle and experience curve. However, as events have shown itself recently, we do live in a global society. It is democratized via social media and Facebook, what have you. So I think you have to be a little bit careful. So when you've got a global brand, presumably you have to have a similar advertising campaign everywhere. Does it work like that? If not similar, then at least bedfellows. At least it's the same brand is speaking to me, perhaps with a slightly different intonation or inflection. We saw recently in China a situation where billboards for luxury advertisements were being taken down. In China, in Beijing, they were saying, look, this is too much, and it's extending the gap between rich and poor, or it's making that gap much more obvious.
when workers can see this fabulous luxury. Is that going to be a problem in some emerging markets for advertisers?
I think one should be brands should be very careful about the degree to which they're willing to set out aspirations that are simply not connected with the real world. So I think a little bit of sensitivity.
And does that then come down to where you would target your brand?
Yes, where and how. Most of it is context. What's the tone?
So when it comes to a company like yours then, how do you expand and grow, which is presumably what you want to be doing, in these difficult times?
With great difficulty. I think focus on the essence of what we do. We are part of the creative Britain, if you like, with the creative industry, which I still maintain is fantastic. That's the icon of UK PLC. Stick with the creativity.
And how important is that creativity for Britain in rebuilding itself, hopefully post a recession? We won't go into a double dip, but in terms of what Britain has to offer, we're constantly being told by the government they want to get away from it being too weighted on the financial sector and get back into manufacturing, but also into these kind of creative industries. How important is advertising in that?
Well, I think creative Britain is incredibly important, and within that, advertising plays its part. I wouldn't overstate it, but it is one of our strengths, if you like, but along with many other industries.
And how do you therefore recruit people into the advertising game? Is that very easy? Is it an easy sell?
It's not a hard sell, but the question really is how do you get the best people to want to join advertising? And that becomes increasingly hard as the industry becomes increasingly under pressure.
And that's because the industry is competitive?
That's because it's competitive and because the margins and the excitement of coming to Bloomberg, for example, maybe is going to be a competitor that simply wasn't there 10 years ago.
But do you find that you need a lot of young people? I mean, you think the whole social networking has changed advertising? We talked about it briefly at the beginning, but has that changed advertising forever?
Yes, I think it has. Maybe not profoundly, but it has. And youth is the engine room of creativity and imagination and energy. Actually.
Because, of course, the kind of endorsements you get on Twitter that are personal endorsements are very different from the kind of billboard advertising campaigns.
Yeah, third-party endorsement will always beat paid for.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Today.
Thank you.